Guess who's back?
Hi, it's me.
And me, Signs and Headlines, a special award season recap, if you will, because
Mhm.
technically award season has not completed. We're just barely halfway through. And admittedly, the most important awards still haven't been given out yet. So, Camille and I thought it'd be a good time to jump back on, ease our way into the year before we get back into the weekly-ish swing of things by, I guess, just talking about what's been happening award season wise. Because as you know, culture is important. Culture tells a bigger story. There is a collective resonance, especially with the winners thus far. So, have you been watching all the awards so far? Critics' Choice and Golden Globes, I guess, are the
I
two.
haven't watched them, but
Mm-hmm.
I've seen obviously all the recaps, all of the red carpet opinions, all of the opinions on the awards. And so, yeah, what this kind of grew out of was me seeing all of that on Instagram and obviously forming opinions and then being like, wait. And then I voice messaged you. I was like, there's something that I don't like about this or that feels off about this. And of course, you being the cultural savant that you are kind of like keyed me in to like what's the larger things that are happening. And so we were like, this has to be a conversation, I think. And hopefully when the rest of award season commences or finishes, we'll be back again to see what panned out and what didn't.
hmm Yeah, honestly, I like this. I think we should do this moving forward. The idea of, all right, halfway point, where
Yes.
do we see things going? But, the reason why this year, especially, it feels more pertinent to have this halfway point conversation is because, well, one, are recording this on the Capricorn new moon. Neptune is about to move into Aries at the end of the month
Yeah,
before the rest of the awards season.
that's
And
right.
then you get into the Saturn and Neptune Aries time, which is so different than Saturn Neptune Pisces. So it would stand to reason outcomes would shift
Mhm.
because planets are shifting. Does that sound fair to you?
It sounds deeply fair, and I'm already thinking about like all the archetypes of like this last Pisces thing that's happening versus
hmm
Aries and where we get like new, fresh things. And yeah,
hmm
so I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, so the plan for today is we're not necessarily going to talk about all the awards. I mean, I know Camille and I are saying award season, but really there's like a specific focus.
That's
And
right.
that specific focus is one battle after another, as well as the conversations about Timothée Chalamet and Michael B. Jordan. People are super pissed if you have not been online about Timothée winning, and Michael B. Jordan not for playing two characters. We'll also definitely get into that. But then we're also going to talk, naturally about just overall like cinema right now. And I think sort of how the awards shows may reflect that with the transits and, again, what we can expect with Saturn and Neptune in Aries.
Yes.
So, where shall we start? Do you want to start Timothy, White Boy of the Year? Do you want to start with One Battle of Another, also another White Boy of the Year? Paul
I
Thomas
mean, what is
Anderson?
fresh on my mind is one battle after the other, and Teyana Taylor's really, really awesome when not going to take that away from her. She is having a moment. Her star is rising. But unfortunately, and you brought this up so beautifully of like what we may be looking at with Jupiter entering Leo with the South Node. What is the story we are being told beyond the win, like underneath the win? What story or what old kind of stories are still being highlighted or still being kind of brought up in the shadow of a win or in the shadow, right, of a major moment? And I think
Mm-hmm.
Tiana Taylor's win is a perfect kind of encapsulation of that, where I think and some other people think that she played a role that's kind of firmly in that like racial regressive playbook with respect to who Black women get to be. And then they get
Mm.
awarded for that. And it's like, yay, I want to see Black women win, but at what cost? And what is the story culturally that we're continuing to tell that maybe we want to think about not telling anymore? So that
Mm.
is where I'm coming in.
I appreciate that perspective because I guess I should have even asked you this. Did you like the movie?
I thought it was meh. I really went into it. I was really, really excited. Like, I love the promotion. I love the cast. I loved what I was seeing
hmm
of that PR run. So I went into it really excited. There were definitely some moments that were like, "Ooh, this is interesting. This is fun." But then I left
hmm
and I was like, and I looked at my partner. We were like, "Oh, that was fine. That was okay." Like, it was, I felt deflated given what I thought it would be. Yeah.
It's funny because obviously you and I we don't talk about very many movies, admittedly, in our Signs and Headlines recap, but
Right.
this was the one movie that we actually spent some time talking about. And, at the time, I remember we had pulled up like the transits, we pulled up Tiana's chart, we pulled up Regina's chart, and it was just the idea of like, oh my God, I think this is going to be like huge for Teyana Taylor. And it's true, right? Obviously, she's worked really hard to get to this point, and she's like laid down brick by brick. It's not been an easy road to necessarily break it into, cinema. And she nailed this role with Paul Thomas Anderson, like legendary director who
Hmm.
also has not like won for his directing. So we're also in a very interesting kind of parallel, PTA in direction and
Hmm.
um Timothée Chalamet and Marty Supreme and Ryan Coogler as well as Michael B. Jordan. So those parallels are very much alive and well. But
Yes.
you know, I pulled up the one battle after another chart just to kind of remind people like what was happening in the sky at the time. It is curious, right, that that movie did come out right before I guess Neptune like moved back into Pisces. It was like
Hmm.
still in Aries, but it was a Saturn and Pisces movie. I guess the moon was in Scorpio, it was on, ooh, interesting. Teyana Taylor's Pluto. It was a Libra, potentially on her Libra moon, Pluto on her nodal axis. I almost feel like because it's hitting Pluto, it's speaking to something deeper, right? There is a wounding that she is here to be a vessel to, to show, to manifest. But again, how that portrayal ultimately comes out is a totally different story.
Yeah, and it's very Plutonian for something to be pretty divisive or to kind of stir up some unsettling material in people.
Hmm.
So that kind of tracks, right? That through line of like intensity. Like not only was the movie hitting on themes that are pertinent and intense, but the more interpersonal, like viewer reaction, depending on like race and gender, it's Plutonian. Yeah, it's crawling and pulling at some deep stuff.
Hmm. Do you see Perfidia embodied by Tiana's placements in the chart?
I think I do. So she has this Mars and Gemini at 0 degrees and like this perfect conjunction between Mercury and Uranus. And I just want to say also, Teyana Taylor and I are kind of chart twins. She was born about 6 weeks before me. So I've seen all this. I am all of this. But that's the revolutionary spirit. That's the revolutionary spirit. And I think that is showing up in her as a person. Like she's a Renaissance woman. The fact that she's gotten into so many different things with success, Capricorn,
Hmm.
but it also came through her character with respect to wanting something more, being unsettled, not wanting really maybe to be the mothering type of person, like wanting to get out there and to continue like moving, which is so
Hmm.
Uranus, it's so Mars as well. Also, the
Hmm.
desensitivity and dissociation, I think, just again, as someone who has these placements, but as someone who is an astrologer and sees these placements in action, it's not
Hmm.
necessarily, I don't know, the most maternal kind of energies, right, that we're working with. And so I saw that in Perfidia, even like her Sun in Sag, her Venus in Sag, kind of like the wild lover, right? The kind
Hmm.
of you can't hold me down, like needing freedom, right? Needing to
Hmm.
pursue something bigger than motherhood, even. Yeah, so I see it perfectly embodied in her chart for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that Chiron in Cancer also, so loud, right? Like when you think about this, the wounding
Yeah.
of maternal instincts, or whether it's even, and here's the thing, like I don't even want to say that because I think I'm just tired of white men writing experiences that are not white.
Yeah, and when I left the movie, I think what I was feeling is underwhelmed isn't it. I just felt like she was in a box. I was just like, like I
Mhm.
thought it would be this bigger, more explosive thing, like seeing her in like a new way and a new light.
Mhm.
And it just wasn't. It was productive. It was something that I've seen so many times over and over and over again.
Hmm. It is kind of one of those things. It's like, shit, am I, especially because here's the thing, I'm not black, right? I'm kind of in this being Asian, you're kind of like straddling the cast a little bit. So you're like, I don't really like fit in either way here. But when I watched it, it did not feel comfortable. And I know maybe the intention is to not make people feel comfortable, but
Yeah.
it wasn't a discomfort that was like, oh my God, this is happening and I should be aware of this. It was more of a, well, I know this is happening, yet somehow this is not like hitting my understanding of the situation. So I don't really understand if I'm not getting it or you're not doing it. But for whatever reason, I'm like, if you're writing the script and in theory, again, these are about characters who you don't really have that experience. And I'm not saying you have to have all that experience, but I don't know, Black Revolutionary Woman, that's just a very specific experience.
It is. And I mean, to use this word, I mean, it was pulled up a lot with like reviews of her character, the Jezebel revolutionary
Mm.
woman, and the way that she represented that. Again, no insight into her character, where she came from, what her thought process was, just like accepting what we're being told or being shown as just like, okay, I guess. And so
Hmm.
like it was like, yeah, it was like a portrayal of that archetype, and it could have been done in such a new and exciting way, and it wasn't, and it just left me feeling so unsatisfied. Like I wanted to go in and eat a meal, and I had some food, and it was kind of okay, but I wasn't full. That's what it
Hmm.
was.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you're right. It made me kind of uncomfortable, not in like I'm familiar with those themes, like not in that kind of way, but it made me uncomfortable where I was like, why are you playing this up so much? And then there's absolutely no resolution to it. It was like satire in a way. I was like, okay, I get the joke. Like, what
Hmm.
is like the fallout? What is the commentary? What is the outcome? And that never came. It was like, and it never released from there. That was
Hmm.
kind of my feeling now that I'm remembering. Yeah.
Do you feel like this is a movie centered around Leo, or is this a movie centered around Perfidia, technically, even though she is supporting character, or is this a movie centered around Chase? Like, this is not even an astrological question, but maybe
Yeah.
more of how
Yeah.
who was the hero of this movie? Who was the centering of this movie?
Well, so I have two answers because it was kind of two different questions. I do think the
Mm,
main person was Leo, but I do think the
mm,
hero was Chase. I
mm.
think Leo was kind of like the organizing principle for all of these different Black women, unfortunately. Like he was the one thing kind of like holding, right, kind of like why there was interest in these women was because of him. He was like the center,
Hmm.
he was the anchoring of it. So I do think that he was like, again, as the biggest star, or as like the main character. I thought Taylor was a side character. Like that was her storyline to me. Like she appeared and then she left just as quickly as she appeared. But I would call Leo's character the main character, and then Chase, which is the daughter he had with Teyana
Hmm.
Taylor's character, the hero, as in like she was the one who instigated the plot. She kept it moving, right, until we got the
Hmm.
final kind of resolution.
It's so interesting to me because I know that people are positioning, like obviously there's such significant Black women influence in the movie, and so it's almost like you can't even say Leo's like the main, but I'm kind of like, well, Leo is being still nominated for Best Lead, and like
Mm.
he is, and there was actually a really great article Jenny had sent me about like this was a year about the white bumbling male saviors on
Yeah.
some level, and this is something that maybe the film was also trying to put out. But I don't know. For whatever reason, I don't really have faith, and maybe this is my bias showing. I don't have faith in white men being that aware to want to like host multiple movies about your bumblingness
Yeah,
around the situation. You know what I mean?
totally.
One thing I did remember from our previous conversation in September was these people are love interests. I
Yeah.
could never buy that in 10,000 years. Like it just did not sit.
There was
Like
no chemistry.
I I don't understand, but it's crazy because when you look at their synastry, like I guess it kind of makes sense. The Venus, like Leo's Venus sun on her Pluto. So I do think you see the one battle after another story here with their synastry as well, but it wasn't a natural pairing off the top of my
It wasn't
head.
a natural pairing. There was no chemistry, which made Teyana Taylor's sexuality feel even more like an object. If I could buy
Mm,
in that they were truly in this relationship together, there was some history, some kind of, humanness there, then
hmm.
Teyana Taylor's character would have been more humanized. But the fact that it felt so like separate, like there wasn't to me, or maybe they wanted there to be and they failed at that, but there just wasn't
Mm.
any chemistry, just made her
Yeah.
feel even more alienated as someone's humanity that was important. It's just like, it was really a trope. I see that they both
Mm.
have the same Mercury-Uranus exact conjunction, and I find that to
Yeah.
be curious.
You
Maybe
know
as like
what?
the lack of chemistry, just like two two kind of dissociated Mercuries. I don't know, but
They're
curious.
kind of doing their own thing. Like
Yeah.
this is, but you know what? Immediately, I think explosives, right? Like with the
Mhm.
Mercury Uranus and how he was big in the explosives and fireworks, and she's literally
Yeah.
pregnant, like with the machine gun. Like it's a cool symbolism, or it's cool symbolism to like borrow from with their charts. And again, you do see it, you naturally see the friction, which is why, for maybe her, she's got like a deeper mission. She's also got that Neptune there, maybe cloudy, confusing, and he's
That's right.
more Libra. So like I have to I have to do the right thing, and the right thing is this, even though really he's like, a deadbeat dad, low key, by like not what drunk driving or something.
Yeah.
I can't remember specifics. I do think it's fascinating that, Leo does have his Neptune on the North Node. And it almost makes me feel as if like that has just such an incredible power at blurring everyone out. You know what I mean? So like almost as if his celebrity will
Mm.
always cast a spell or be this overcast onto everyone else. So it's hard for me to view Leo outside of Leo, actually. Like I just think of Leo playing another character, even though I know his whole like repertoire is he's a method or not method actor, but he really involves himself in his roles and he really transforms. I don't know. This was a role that I just kept thinking like this is Leo. This is Leo playing a revolutionary, not Leo as a revolutionary.
Totally. Yeah.
It didn't
Yeah.
connect for me.
You were saying something about his presence blotting everyone out. And when you look at his chart on its own, he has that Pluto on the ascendant, which who else has that? Katy Perry, right? So their names just kind of suffocating everything else in the room, where it's like all the energy or gravitas just goes to this one person or this one character,
Hmm.
whether it's deserved or not. But yeah, I can see that as both a confluence of Neptune, but also that Pluto ascendant as like, I'm just going to suck up all the oxygen.
Classic Pluto the Ascendant, but also on
Yeah.
his moon, which means, it's so interesting to even think about that symbolism of him like blotting out other women because, like
Oof.
more
Oof.
femininity or female figures, like, yeah, like when you're with him, you are not going to be the thing in the room. Like, it's going to be Leo. And unless he is not dating you, then like they're more of an equal.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
there's some interesting dynamics here. But obviously, one thing that people have commented on, and Paul Thomas Anderson has a double A chart actually, or like a pretty solid chart. PTA and Tiana seem to get along marvelously. I think even Ben Affleck like entered the chat recently. I saw a clip. He was like, I was on the phone FaceTiming PTA, and it just seemed like you and him and Tiana were just having such a good time. And it made me feel like, damn, this movie is going to be big and it's going to do well. And because they've got this vibe going. And I'm just, I wish I could be a part of that. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
you cancer, Venus Cancer, man, like classic. But, we didn't actually look at PTA's chart the first time we talked about him. This is the chart of an artistic genius. I personally love his repertoire of work. Again, this is not my favorite movie of his movies, but I respect his canon. Now, that being said, is there anything about the chart that, we can point to around the reception of this movie, his undertaking of this movie?
Yeah, so this is where things got interesting in the voice notes back and forth because you'd let me
Mm,
know that he had Mars in Cancer, and I think what I kind of got from the movie is like, yes, Teyana Taylor is having a moment, like she is a woman who is being exalted, but fundamentally Mars in Cancer is like a man coming in to like fuck up women's things or telling a woman's story and doing it in a very masculine way, or how Cancer is a sign that references the past constantly and kind of like
mm,
this blindness to like, no, I'm moving forward. I'm doing a revolutionary Mars thing, but you're borrowing the same tropes. You're borrowing the same stories, the same ethos, right? That has like followed
mm,
blaxploitation kind of like filmmaking or like this kind of telling racial stories filmmaking and thinking you're doing it in a new way. But the Mars and Cancer to me, it just says like, no, you're deeply informed by what was and not
mm,
necessarily imagining what things could look like moving forward. I also see now he has an exact square between his sun and his Uranus, so it makes sense, right, for like that revolutionary archetype to live in him. And he made like a movie about these things. But again, like the sun in Cancer is like, what exactly are you lighting fire underneath? Is it something new
mm,
and interesting? Or again, is it something that's kind of reductive? That's what I think.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting because again, I first time really like looking at the chart. The only time I pulled this chart up was before the Critics' Choice Awards because that was like around the full moon in Cancer that weekend, and I was like, I wonder who's going to win Best Director because I couldn't tell between Coogler's chart and his, but when I
Mm.
looked at both, I'm like, oh, I mean Mars in the second house, like this is your bread and butter. Like you were definitely taking Best Director, and Coogler had a Mars in Capricorn in his third. I'm like, okay, screenplay
Wow.
makes sense. So that came very, very like loud. But
Wow, just the dichotomy there between Coogler doing something completely new and ambitious and PTA kind of not. An opposite
right.
Mars.
And I feel like early 2026. So right until this Capricorn new moon happening in like a few hours, we are still wrapping up 2025.
Yeah.
Especially because of that full moon in Cancer. Like if you think about 2025, we had that Mars retrograde in Cancer, that station at 17 degrees Cancer. So for Paul, this was a really, oh, well, Paul is for a first name basis. This is a very significant station. And so this
Mm,
movie was his Mars retrograde narrative.
mm,
And it makes sense that there would be celebration around it at the full moon in Cancer, in the wake of the full moon in Cancer. But it would be interesting to think about now after Mars and everything moves into Aquarius, after there's like this rinse and repeat cycle. I don't know. It just to me feels like there is another turning point. I don't necessarily
mm.
see this movie going all the way. I still actually firmly believe Sinners is going to take Best Picture. Director, maybe that's something that PTA can take, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem like the transits are
Mm.
of this moment. It does seem like they're of 2025, if that makes
That, yeah,
sense.
that does kind of track. And it makes sense with that Mars and Cancer as like just now catching up with the past.
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of
I
still there. Yeah.
it's interesting because we still have this Jupiter Cancer in the air, like this air of nostalgia, right? Like people are still clamoring onto the past, like
Hmm.
very, very real talk. But what's also interesting with PTA's chart is, we talk about that Mars in Cancer. Well, he's got an Aries moon ruling that conjunct Chiron. So there is a bit of this tension naturally, right? And also you can kind of maybe see this identity or this idea of maybe not knowing how to voice an opinion from the
Hmm.
female perspective, especially when I
Hmm.
think about like Aries moons, like they're firecracker type of energies, maybe like,
Yeah.
revolutionary type of energies. And the Chiron there it feels interesting. The way
Mm.
Chiron in Tiana's chart was also on the south node, just like the prominence of Chiron here.
Yeah. Very cool.
Don't know what that means fully. Especially because here's the thing, the US is also navigating what is Chiron's return. There's something significant happening with Chiron in the United States chart too. And there is
Mm.
naturally a lot about identity, politics with Chiron and Aries. How do I assert myself? How do I get a seat at the table? And for him too, again, this is like his 10th movie and he's never won. And it's insane because he's produced some incredible, incredible bodies of work.
Yes. Yeah.
One thing to point out with his chart, obviously, with these early degrees and cardinal signs, naturally, this is a very important time for him. With Saturn and
Yeah.
Neptune moving into Aries, the Venus retrograde stationing at the 8 degrees, the eclipse. So it would stand to reason this movie would have some significant legs behind it as it goes into award season. But I thought it would also be interesting to look at Assata's chart because this is the person in question that we believe Perfidia to be based off, or at least be inspired by. And again, this was around the time the movie released. Assata unfortunately had passed, so there was this air of revolutionary,
Yeah. In the
basically.
air. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was interesting potentially to maybe look at her chart to see like, well, can we maybe understand her POV rather than the interpretation of her POV by a white man? I
Mm.
mean, all that cancer, it's hard not to say maternal.
Deeply maternal. Yeah. I'm seeing the Mars and Gemini connection between her and Teyana Taylor. Maybe I'm seeing my own Mars and Gemini a little bit differently too, with respect to words as revolution, storytelling as revolution, getting, reframing facts as revolution. She also had Uranus there. That's
Hmm.
pretty interesting to note between like her and Perfidia. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it is a very complicated dynamic, right,
Mm.
in Asada's chart, because when I think of someone who is this Cancerian, right, Cancer stellium, potentially Cancer moon, I don't know her time, but a Venus in Cancer, a Mercury retrograde in Cancer, as well as a Cancer sun, this is someone who, like, tribe and kin and family, like, this is everything.
Mm.
And I think she said something along the lines of, like for her to leave America and to be in exile in Cuba away
Yeah.
from like family and stuff like that is difficult. That is not a casual like I'm going to do this because I'm a selfish person. I'm doing this because I genuinely like I love my family, but also I love my family in a country that does not love me,
That's
right? And
right.
so it's complicated, the sense of belonging. It's not just selfishness. It's
Yeah.
there's layers to it. But it's interesting. She also has her Uranus and moon. And again, we don't know where the moon is, but it's in a 10-degree orb still in theory, potentially. Uranus conjunct the moon. This is not someone who's going to be traditional and wants independence and
That's
freedom.
right.
And so it is interesting to see that also play out. But it's almost like, again, to reduce her to just one thing feels like a caricature.
It does. I'm noticing her Pluto Saturn conjunction, which can also be quite revolutionary, like disrupting the systems. Referencing PTA's chart, he had Venus in Leo at 11. And it's a very Venusian thing, I think, to just take, just to make it bubblegum, just to make it
Mm.
undepthful, right? To take the story or the idea or the essence of someone who really lived this work and the consequences of this work and kind of Venus on top of his Venus on top of like that Pluto Saturn conjunction as like, yeah, I want to make it art, I want to make it beautiful, but it also in some way lacked substance in the way that sometimes Venus can do, right? Because that's what
Hmm.
Venus is, light and fluffy stuff sometimes. So yeah, I was just like comparing her chart to his chart, since
Mm.
she was an inspiration or a ghost inspiration, as like where she was showing up for him and how that's like being actualized through his chart.
It's interesting because I don't think I've actively or explicitly heard him mention her
Okay, so it's
in
just
like
like an
in
essence.
speeches.
Okay.
I don't know because that's the thing. Maybe he's like talked about her in an interview and I've completely missed it. So I don't wanna inadvertently say like PTA did not mention Asada. The comments will obviously check me on that. But like it just would feel difficult to imagine him not acknowledging her. So if he hasn't, then it's kind of like, hmm. But even pulling up Teyana's chart with Assata, I mean, that Jupiter-Pluto hit between the both of them, that's so profound,
Mm.
But then also, as you pointed out, the Mars Gemini, but then Tiana's is retrograde. So when you think about Mars Gemini, right, it's like two sides to every story, and maybe Asada gets one side, and really we only ever will get one side of the story because it's your subjective opinion about your experience, and then someone coming in and interpreting that from the outside.
I'm curious what you think about the Pluto Jupiter between them.
Mm,
Curious what that brings up for you.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a Jupiter-Pluto square in my chart, and usually, yeah, there is a sense of like how hubris maybe, LOL, I'm not reading myself, how hubris can kind of get you in trouble, and how the ego can get you in trouble. It's almost like where do you derive your confidence from, because Jupiter really talks a lot about confidence. And so if there is confidence that is being given up to like whether it's the system or whether it's your confidence or your fears being defined by the system or the role or whatever, like you have to almost, I think, subvert the limitations of what's being imposed on you. You have to like allow that confidence to like come from within. And, when
Mm-hmm.
you think about Jupiter and Pluto, like there's a depth of experience here that, again, to me, I think there is a very deeply spiritual connection. And like when Tiana Taylor's talking, or I believe Tiana when she's talking about like this is, I feel like an important role. And, these are all the reasons why I think maybe this is how I'm interpreting the role. And even her speech at the Golden Globes, as using this as a vessel to talk about, you can be soft and you can be strong and, we are multifaceted people, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think she's almost like the other piece to it. And maybe then if you bring Tiana and Asada together, it becomes a more complete character, you know?
Yes, yes. I totally agree. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I think they both explore different egos with Jupiter Pluto, but I just either way think that there is a profound spiritual like passing on, that Tiana's the vessel as an artist naturally to communicate these stories, even if maybe it might be challenging our perception of it as well. So I do want to leave space for that too. Because Mars and Gemini I think is really fascinating. It's not just you can't just pinpoint it down to one thing. And for us even to project a certain image or a certain narrative onto a Sada would be also doing that Mars and Gemini a
Absolutely.
disservice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, we try here, but realistically, right, when you think about, okay, the ethos of this movie, one battle after another, coming out during these very, very Pluto, Aquarius, Saturn, Neptune station times where, things are in flux. ICE immigration is, or ICE agents are terrorizing cities, murdering citizens. We also have of course, like representation getting taken away. So there's just it's a very tumultuous time in the collective. And so it's interesting that, this movie, of course, is getting a lot of celebratory fanfare. However, on the other side, we have Sinners, right?
Yeah.
This incredibly beautiful original piece of work from Ryan Coogler. It is, to me, embodying this Saturn Neptune energy around original storytelling, ownership, and yet it's not doing so hot right now.
Yeah, I was
What's
gonna
up with
say like the
that?
difference between one battle after the other and Sinners is that I think Sinners was not of this world. One battle after
Mm.
the other, or after another, whatever the title is. It told a story that we knew. It's stuff that we've seen before, and not to speak poorly about American audiences, but we love things that are they love things that are familiar that they can slot in to something that they've seen or they can make sense of. And Sinners was not that.
I mean, the cancer stellium of the United States, this is why we love freaking like sequels, prequels. Like, we just love one story and we want to just like keep
That's
that
right.
story
And just like
going.
be in this circle the drain with that story forever and ever. Yeah, so Sinners was a real kind of hit to that kind of media ecosystem, which kind of feeds and copies like the same things over and over again. It offered something new, it offered something different. And I think people saw that and felt that, which is why it is and it will be what it is forever, just like this zeitgeisty film. But I also
Hmm.
think it's why bad actors like that writer, either at Variety or Vanity Fair, like
Variety.
yeah, like the articles written about it and like the cognitive dissonance around it, or like even this one well-meaning media executive being like, no, we want Sinners 2 and Sinners 3, and we want to see it from Remy's perspective. No, we don't. You guys do.
Who wants to see it from Remy's
Of
perspective?
course, the white guy was like, we want to see the white guy's perspective. Like, do you hear yourself when you're talking? But
Oh
that's the
my
thing. It's
God.
like old America, or like the way we've been doing things, like they don't know how to react to this except for in the old kind of playbook ways. But what this film did, I think, was reveal a new playbook, not only with his Coogler's deal with Warner Brothers, but also the
Hmm.
playbook of like what Black characters can be, what Black films are, how it can
Hmm.
feel, and how it can be medicine instead of one battle after the other, which felt like, oh, that was just another. That's how I felt after the film. Like that was just another battle. Like,
Yes.
oh, that's how that felt. But Sinners, I left and I was transported. It was just so magical. I can't talk highly enough of it.
Oh, it was honestly, I'm so happy that Christopher Nolan, who's the, president of the Directors Guild right now, and he's obviously the director and producer of The Odyssey coming out with the Jupiter and
Yes.
Leo of it all, like incredible epic. But it I'm so happy that he is throwing his power and his influence by organizing screenings for Sinners
Can we
because
see his chart? I'm curious. Look,
oh,
I'm just curious
July
what the Sinners date
30th.
would be. Yeah.
Classic,
Because
July
he's also
30th.
someone who wants to push the format forward. I think technically, right, with him shooting in IMAX and all of that. So it
Yeah.
makes sense that another film that wants to push things forward in a different way would really pique his interest as something that's worth kind of motivating behind or kind of organizing behind.
Oh, look at the Mars. Look at the sun Mars. Like that's
Okay.
cheerleader. Oh my
Yeah.
God, Venus and Pluto on the south node of the Cinder release.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my God, opposing moons. Potentially, not, but that's a vibe.
It is a vibe.
Oh, Neptune and Juno. Soul, there's some spiritual art soul contract here.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of cool, actually. Hold on. What is Ryan
What about
Coogler's
him and
chart?
Ryan Coogler? Yeah.
Okay, the Venus and okay, I do think that Christopher could be a Cancer moon. Like he makes these films that America just fucking eats up, right?
And he
And
uses the same cast over and over again. Like that's his
yeah,
family.
we love it. I love it. I mean Jupiter. Oh, Jupiter on the South Node. There we go.
And it's in
Benefactor.
Libra. Yes. And it's from kind of behind the scenes. I don't know if, oh, this is Ryan Coogler's like actual birth time.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So this is
Yes.
this is this is for real, for real. LOL.
Secret helper. Yeah.
Oh my God, that 28 degrees, baby. That was the new moon in Libra. And
Was
now we're
it? Wow.
28 degrees, and now we're at the Capricorn new moon at 28 degrees. So I think there's going to be a shift. I think this Cap new moon is shifting
Yeah.
for
And that's why
Sinners.
after this, hopefully it's Ryan Coogler and Sinners that wins everything.
Literally. I think it's interesting, actually. I didn't notice this earlier because I think I pointed out with One Battle After Another, it was a Saturn retrograde Pisces
Mhm.
movie and Neptune retrograde Aries. So it makes sense that with Saturn currently still, or I guess, well, no, that doesn't check. I thought for a second, I'm like, well, maybe there's something to be said about the retrogrades, but no.
Here's what I think about it. I think One Battle After Another was kind of broadcast or hyped as this like new kind of thing. At least that's what it felt to me. Like all these new actors, Teyana Taylor's and whatever. Very Aryan, right? Very like doing new stuff, but it's
Mhm.
retrograde and we're heading back into Pisces. It was the same old grab bag stuff that we've seen
Mm.
in Monsters Ball, that we've seen, right, in The Help, that we've seen like these same tropes, these same roles. So that's what I thought about. It was like masquerading as like this revolutionary thing, but it was retrograde and running back into Saturn. It was the same
Ah.
playbook. Sinners was Neptune 0 degrees moving forward away, right? Kind of from Saturn, and even though it's slower.
Yes,
That's how I was thinking
yes.
about it in my mind. Like retrograde is regressive, but when
Mm-hmm.
planets move direct, we're kind of in new territory. We can do fresh new stuff. So that's how I was
Oh,
kind of doing the difference there.
land the plane, nailed it.
Yeah.
Because yeah, that would make sense. That's why when the Oscars come around, Neptune and Saturn are firm, 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 fresh. That is more resonant energy with Sinners than it is
Yes.
one battle after another.
Because we want to see new things. We want to celebrate new things. We want to create a new paradigm for what gets to win. Yes. But we're in the
Yes.
old paradigm right now of what gets to win. Sorry, Teyana Taylor. Much
So,
respect to you. But we're still in the sleepiness and the haze and the illusion of Neptune and Pisces and Saturn and
yeah.
Pisces.
I mean, this is a difficult question, right? Would you rather win or not for this role? Or you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah. You mean Tiana's role?
like as a black artist, and this is again fucked up that this is a question
I
that any
know.
non-white person would have to contend with, right? If I
Because the
wanted
white people, they don't have to think about this. They don't have to think about what repercussions is this going to feed to the community that I belong to? Because you get to win at everything if you're white. But if you're black, you have to like think maybe about like the consequences of winning for this role.
literally.
Yeah, that's interesting. If I were her, I would want not to win. It's good enough to be kind of acclaimed and be in the room and be nominated.
Mm,
If that's the win. I would
hmm
want to win for something that felt like it was truer to Black humanity. And she
mm.
said something like, um, she was defending her role as in like, this is what Black women go through. We have to deal with these like perverted motherfuckers. Absolutely, absolutely, we do. And
Hmm.
about 1,000 million other things
Yeah.
as well. Like, why are we only focusing on like the darkest experiences of being a Black woman? Like, come on. Anyway,
I mean, here's the thing, right? Like people, it's so fascinating because to me, one battle after another, even though it is a movie about revolution and we are in revolutionary times, like it fits the themes, right, of the symbolism of the moment. And yet, I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so tired. I'm so tired of seeing like people struggle like this and
yeah,
like these are the like 12 Years a Slave, right? Like these are the only movies really, like that's why Sinners was so like groundbreaking because it was such an original story, like and yet it still had so much depth. It showed a different kind of character you could play, like there was
yeah.
just an imagination of you could be something completely different, not
Yes. I
imposed
saw
by a
myself.
system.
Yeah, I saw myself in those Black characters. There wasn't anything about it that felt like alien to me just because it wasn't telling the same story. It was like, yeah, 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 no, this is a part of my humanity too. I'm a medicine woman and I'm gonna, like I loved it. It was like
Mhm.
what we could be instead of what we have been. Ugh.
In theory, if people were truly trying to honor other voices, you then think about what awards are still getting handed out as a function of that. What is still
Yeah.
accepted? But again, with Sinners in One Battle After Another, it's an interesting parallel again because what you really have here, as you pointed out, is a movie that was still rooted in the past and one firmly headed to the future. And yet both are in a showdown right now.
Hmm.
Whether it's the directors who have been long overdue and a new director that should get shine,
Yeah,
or an old actor that has, it's like pulling a Leo DiCaprio, like nominate, 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 never winning for a strong body of work. But then also, like, well, how does that compare to someone who is the face of one of the most successful movies, the anchor of one of the most successful movies of the year? So, have you watched him? So now we move on to
there's one
the,
last thing I wanted to say about
oh,
the sinners
yes.
release and one battle after
Yeah.
another. The Jupiter of it all. The North Node was in Pisces for both films, which I think is
Mm,
interesting with like the conversations being brought up around media. But one had Jupiter in Gemini, and traditionally, right, this is where Jupiter would be struggling. But a more contemporary or modern way to look at this is like Jupiter has some interesting tools at its disposal, and it's going to use them in very interesting, in new ways. So I see the Sinners release and this Jupiter and Gemini also as a significator of something new and different and disruptive. Fast forward, we get Jupiter in Cancer with one battle after another, which is like, okay, we've been in Jupiter in Cancer land since 1776. Like, whatever. Like, it's the same kind of American media, whatever, that we've been in this whole time. So I also think like the difference in Jupiter is saying and doing a lot here too.
I love that. And you know what? Justice for the debilitated planets, okay?
Yes.
Justice for the planetary condition. Because as you pointed out, Jupiter in Cancer, is part of the United States Constitution, basically. And therefore, you're kind of like, okay, Jupiter's exalted in Cancer. So what does that mean? We're greedy, we're bloated, like we just keep going, we have diabetes. Like,
That's
what's
right. We
up?
just keep consuming and consuming and consuming. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm like, it's hilarious with the diabetes because of the consumption of Neptune and the cultural appropriation. God, that's an intellectual joke. But Jupiter and Gemini here, as you said, we're breaking out of the spell cast by Jupiter in Cancer. And granted, Gemini comes before Cancer, right? So in theory, you should have this new curiosity that you can then put feelings to and then really blow it up.
Absolutely.
Versus, oh, we tried something new, we don't like it, so we're like running
Heading right
back.
back.
What the
Yeah.
hell? Very profound. It is squaring the nodes at the time of
Yes.
release as well. So you're like, ooh, there was a big choice here that was
Ah,
being made.
that makes me worry or be curious about, the rest of the award season is Jupiter in
Mm.
Cancer. And I think of
Hmm.
Jupiter also as a planet of like the king of the gods, like rubbing shoulders with powerful people. So our award shows, celebrities, red carpet, very
Hmm.
Jupiterian. I just hope it doesn't show up in the awards that are actually presented. I hope we get the newness because of the Neptune of it all.
Interesting.
But I'm worried about
Yeah.
that. I'm worried about that.
That is a fair consideration because one of the things that people have, and actually that's a great segue, so thank you for that,
Yeah.
into Timothée or at least just a conversation about Timothée, because
Is it really Timothée?
I don't know. I like to just lean into that.
Is it not
Timothée
just Timothy?
Chalamet.
I was like, I
Honestly,
appreciate that, but yeah.
all
Okay.
I want is to just call him Timmy Tim, just like if I could be at like a first name basis with everyone, that would make my life so much easier, frankly. But Timothée Chalamet, like to me, that people are complaining about him because this is a movie, Marty Supreme, which if you haven't seen Marty Supreme yet, I'm just gonna say it's not my favorite movie of the year. It's not my favorite Safdie movie as well. It's a good movie, but I think people should view it really as the vessel for Timothée to like get the Oscar. Like
Mhm.
everything marketing wise, ethos, Marty Supreme, like impossible is nothing type of energy, like GOAT status. That movie came out early on the Sagittarius new moon. So in my
Mm.
head, I'm like, okay, bet this like hits thematically. This makes a lot of sense. But there is a deeper commentary with the movie, I must say, about the consequences of going after your dreams so recklessly, which is very Jupiter Cancer
Sag.
America coded and SAG. Yeah. So like to me, it's also a movie about America at this moment, which I really
Mm.
appreciate. And he is the consummate white guy who I've worked so hard and I have privilege, but I've worked really hard still, and like I should still get something, right? Like that's
Mm.
Timothy's ethos these last few years. And granted, yeah, he's a very talented actor, and it sucks to not
Yes.
see him win, but does that justify him getting an award now? Granted, I
Yeah.
do think he actually did crush this performance, but other people disagree. Other people
I
disagree.
did not see this movie, so for the listeners, for the viewers, I'm a little bit biased just because I don't have a view into it. But yeah, what I know about it, like I just saw a meme about it. It's like, oh yeah, another white guy ruins everyone and everything in his path to get to his dream, which is very reckless, Sag energy, like manifest destiny at any cost, which is very
Hmm.
America.
Tale us all his time. Jupiter
Tails all the
came.
time.
Like it's again when you appreciate it when you see the symbolism, you're like, okay, great. Like I understand why these movies are coming up in the ethos, right? But it's very fascinating then to think, okay, there's a movie about a revolution
Mm,
and complications of race dynamics in this country. There's a movie about what it says about America's greed and pursuit of happiness and greatness. And then there's this idea of we've got original storytelling from a community that has traditionally not been respected in this country. So who wins out in this moment in time? These are truly
no.
all questions that are permeating in the ethos.
Yeah. Yeah. They're each so culturally rich. Nothing,
Mhm.
no one can win or not win without it actually reverberating out into the zeitgeist in some timely way.
That's why
Yeah,
culture is important.
it
And
is.
so here's the thing, I before this year even transpired, 2026, I've already, when you look at Timothée Chalamet's chart, right? This person is finishing up his Saturn return. The war season's happening with Saturn and Neptune on his moon. I mean, even if I pull up his progressions, okay, like all I'm saying is this man, if he does not win,
Oh
would
yeah. Wow.
just feel like I wouldn't know how to read a chart. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, this is quite lovely. And even when I pull up the solar arcs, which is like the biographical manifestation of stuff, you see, like I mean, all of this Aquarius now with the
Yeah.
stellium and the fact that we're going into a Aquarius season with all this stuff, like I don't know, there's just some like really interesting things here. And I can't help but think again, this is his Saturn return story, right? If you think about just his chart, you interpret his chart with this fifth house stellium in Cap.
Hmm.
He wants it. He wants to be this creative, this personality, this actor, right? Like, and this is a movie about the pursuit of greatness, which is so Cap coded.
It is.
It's his chart.
Yes. He's playing himself. This is an interesting exercise in how actors always tend to play roles or their most acclaimed roles are just literally manifestations of their chart.
I
Like
think
even the
it's so
fact that Marty
beautiful.
Supreme was ping pong and that's a fifth house thing, sports. Yeah.
Totally. I mean, he's got Mars, I mean, in a loose conjunct, I mean, very, very wide orb, not even like, actually an orb really, but just the idea, right? The sun is cradled between Jupiter in Sag and Mars in Capricorn. There's a line in the movie where he's like, this is an obligation. I have
Mhm.
an obligation to see this out and to actually make this happen because not everyone has that, but I have that. And I'm like, yeah, I believe that. I believe that, Timothy, because that cap is so loud and this Jupiter and Mars is so loud. Like, of
Yeah, like the
course.
Jupiter in Sag, like providing like the vision. This is what it could be. This is what's possible. And on the other side, Mars and Capricorn, it's like, bet, let's make it work. Let's climb up the mountain then. And you have no choice but to then realize your potential with those two
Literally.
energies, like cradling your sun. Yeah.
Oh my God, what I just realized too, obviously, this new moon in Capricorn, 28 degrees, that will be trining into his midheaven in Taurus at 28, with Uranus currently on that midheaven. Again, like
Uranus
this.
has also activated his Uranus, the new moon, because he has that 29 degrees of Cap. So like double Uranus activation.
Here's the thing, right? Like, as much as you can see, like, okay, yeah, there can be commentary about like, does he deserve to win or not? When you look at the chart, you're like, hot fucking damn, like it is a hot zone. It would be just so surprising and yet very Uranian if he did actually end up losing because when you think about the Chiron on the North Node and the Chiron on his South Node, like look at the Chiron activations hitting his chart
Yeah.
right now too. I do think
Between the
it.
second and eighth, too. Like, what is my
Mhm.
value to others? Yeah.
What and also, when you think about all the stuff with like Kylie Jenner and like
Mhm.
his relationship making more news and how he's like, I want to thank my partner. Like before this, right? It was, I'm here to pursue greatness and no one can stop me or whatever. And I'm gonna call out Viola Davis. Like I do respect his ability to pay homage. That's why I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not in the business of necessarily like defending white men like this. However, hot damn. Like I see it. It all makes sense with the chart. And if this person were coming to me for a session, I'd be like, yeah, this is your story and you
Yeah,
should lean in and this is what is going to bring you some glory. But the humility piece is interesting because he has taken a more humble tone to his award show presentation this year compared to last year. And again, part of it is also like I want to thank my partner.
yeah,
And I think that's very profound with the Chiron in Libra as well. Almost like before, I can do this on my own,
sure.
but let me now like really solidify that I can only really do this with the support of a partner, really.
Yeah. I love Uranus on the midheaven for like anyone looking at it. It could be something that's like disruptive. And of course, like the cultural commentary is just something he cannot control. But I also see it as just like reaching an unprecedented height in your career, like breaking a personal glass ceiling. And so
Hmm.
it would make sense with all these Uranus activations that, yeah, he's like broken through in a pretty major way. Plus, during his Saturn return with like the sextile between Uranus and Saturn. Yeah.
And the fact that he's got Venus in Aquarius, like again, he's just got a very Saturnian chart.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, right? Because all that Saturn is under the guise of this mutable Virgo, this Mercury Neptune. So, like, you may not know how much work he's ever put into something because he's always going to want to portray as like cool guy or whatever. But like,
Sure. Yeah.
he worked for this for 6 years. He practiced ping pong for 6 years across multiple film sets, and like, I think that's really like admirable,
It
you know?
is.
Like
Yeah.
shit, white boy aside, like you put in so much work. That's amazing. But again, is it enough to go up against someone who played two roles
Hmm.
in one movie? Okay.
Yeah. In like the movie.
In the movie, the highest, like the most successful of the year, Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. When you compare this chart and you compare it to Timothee's chart, it's not as compelling in terms of activations right now,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Which is tough. Which is a tough pill to swallow because again, I actually see that Michael B. Jordan is gonna have a very incredibly successful career and he is gonna be like a very like he is already a leading man, but it's
Mhm.
just gonna keep going, especially like when Jupiter moves in. Like honestly, even Jupiter in Leo could be interesting, but when Jupiter moves into Virgo for sure, right? Like Jupiter
Yeah.
opposition, like I just think his moment, he's still gonna keep expanding. But he might mostly be like a movie star type of energy, like The Rock or
Mhm.
like, yeah, my Jenny was also saying Chris Evans types, like not necessarily like Oscar types, even though he's obviously like incredibly talented. But
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking with you about this, how, because cancer is such an important sign in
mhm,
America, like if you're an actor and you have cancer placements, that's like a pretty good boost, right? Because we want to see things that reference that heavy, like cancer nostalgic stuff that we have in our eighth house as America. And so I see Michael B. Jordan with his moon and cancer in the 11th house, as you said, being a Chris Evans or being like a bona fide movie star in that 11th house way, but it not being quite the same as like Timothée Chalamet, which feels like very like art house, like very indie, like very, yeah, it's kind of like a different kind of movie star,
mhm,
still equally as valid. But
mhm,
it's different, right? The way that audiences and I guess like the awards people like treat them.
mhm.
Yeah. Like big
Yeah.
blockbuster things tend not to be as respected at award shows, is my conception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why Sinners is breaking it's mind-boggling, right? Because you get quality and it
Hmm.
sells,
Yeah.
which is the holy grail of what you would want. And so it's very confusing. It's almost like people can't believe it in the sense that it's too good to be true because we've
Hmm.
never been able to do it in this manner. And yet you came out the gate immediately with this ownership, not immediately, it's taken a while to get this point, but with the ownership deal, with this ability to kind of put your own stuff out, like whoa, you don't need our help. You don't need the system's
Yeah.
help. And it is interesting because obviously when you think of someone, especially Timothée with like all his Capricorn, right? You're thinking about the system backing him and supporting him in whatever capacity. And so, the idea that Marty Supreme is a movie fundamentally led by Timothée. Like
Mhm.
everything marketing wise, everything is centered on Timothée Chalamet. And this is something we talked about too. Sinners even though Michael B. Jordan is, it's so interesting, the Chiron in Gemini, again, almost as if the two is not being acknowledged, right?
Yeah.
In his chart even. There were so many things that were more memorable than the performance.
Mhm.
Whether it was, again, the original story, whether it was Wumi's character, Miles' character, the music, like that music scene, all my favorite scenes didn't include Michael B. Jordan in the
Yeah.
movie, right?
And you
And
said something, yeah, I was gonna say you said something about it being ensemble versus Marty
yeah,
Supreme being like strictly about Timothée Chalamet. And
yeah.
that feels very Cancer Moon in the 11th, opposite the fifth house stuff. Because fifth house is very me, it's very personal interest, it's very
Mm-hmm.
centered, like in the way that we saw with Timothy's chart. But that
Yeah.
moon in Cancer, it's very powerful as well. It's like, no, you constellate around so many others, or like it's about the group. Like even when I think about Black Panther, that was an ensemble cast too. And so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
is Michael B. Jordan perhaps being drowned out, cosmically or not, just because he's part of so many like groups or like
Mm-hmm.
casts where it's like him and so many other people. And when I think about
Mm-hmm.
Fruitvale, that wasn't the case. It felt like it was very strictly him driving
Yeah.
that film, his first film with Ryan. So yeah, that's an
Yeah.
interesting kind of difference between him and Timothy's chart. They're both Virgo risings. But he has that 11th house activation, which necessarily pulls him into group dynamics, which necessarily then waters down one's personal star power in the kind
Mm-hmm.
of way. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, one thing I will say is right, we had the sexualization of Teyana Taylor and Black women in her role, but when I think about even the Golden Globe speech, right, like that Nikki Glaser opening monologue, it was like, oh, there's two Michael B. Jordans, and so Nikki B. Jerkin, right? Like there's still this undertone of sexualization, and that also to me plays into the Lilith and Cancer moon. Like you
Yeah,
cannot see him outside of this heartthrob type of energy, which can be
true.
frustrating, right? So it's almost like Michael, you got to go ugly, like you got to uglify yourself in the next role. You cannot play
Yeah.
someone attractive. You got to do what the women do in Hollywood, like Charlize
Yeah, so I say with
Theron.
Monster, like to be taken seriously must be ugly. Sit in the
Yes.
makeup chair.
Literally. So, Michael, please choose a role that will completely defile you because that is how you're going to get it. Because it's going to be so hard for people to see outside of that lens of, oh my
Yeah.
God, attractive black man. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. Even like Michael B. Jordan's mom, her reaction to that was so funny. I was like, oh my God, this is so cringe.
I also see that Venus conjunct Neptune as like heartthrob, just a
Totally.
handsome man, but it's hanging out between the nodes. And so there's something very square the nodes, right? So there's something potentially problematic about how this projection of like beauty or handsomeness or heartthrobiness
Hmm.
is projected onto him. When I think of that North Node in Aries in the eighth house, there is something about sovereignty or being seen maybe for your personal efforts and not just necessarily like how you look. And then that South Node in Libra. Yeah, it's like very much someone who's fighting to be seen for their actions, for their effort, and not just necessarily for the veneer or
Hmm.
like what they maybe like represent, but like the
Yeah.
meat of who someone is in the eighth house. Yeah.
I think that this is also something you can say about Timothy's, like just the idea, right? Like you're a young white kid and you got all this opportunity. So you've had enough time to build a legacy. And so people are like, well, you deserve it because you've gotten so many more different kinds of roles that you have accesses to, right? And with Michael B. Jordan's chart, I can't help but think with the North Node and the eighth, like he had to find the right partners, i.e., like Coogler, right? You have to start
Yes.
your own production company. You got to start your own thing. You can't rely on the system giving you roles because those are not the roles that are going to actually give you what you want. And so there is this, it's almost a different kind of struggle in each chart, right? Almost like with Timothée, you're not going to get handed stuff. You're going to really have to work for it. And with Michael, it's like also you can't rely on people giving you these roles because it's again not the roles that are gonna like really break you out or like they're gonna really
Mm.
help you, and you have to go real. You can't, because the square to the nodes is interesting, wanting to be palatable, but also wanting to
Ooh,
lean into authenticity, right?
yes, that's exactly it. Yeah, the palatableness of Venus, Neptune, and what we were talking about with like PTA's
Mm-hmm.
Paul's Venus.
Pause.
It wants to make something palatable. It wants to make things likable, but Aries does not. Aries is that like rugged individualism. It's like I don't care if you
Mm-hmm.
like this or not, but I get relief because I'm being me. I'm being
Mm-hmm.
authentic. I also noticed that Michael B. Jordan is in a Saturn square
Yeah, he
whereas
is.
Chalamet is in that Saturn return. And so that's an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic where I think the Saturn return is both a culmination and a seeding, which feels very
Mm-hmm.
appropriate for like getting awards, getting your flowers, and like so many things happen around those age periods. But the
Mm-hmm.
Saturn square is more so like a little bit of a disappointment or confronting or like I need to adjust or pivot one's ideals or like their goals or like how you're moving through the world. It does
Mm-hmm.
kind of feel like a Saturn square. It feels a little bit more like a pinch versus the Saturn
Mm-hmm.
return feels a little bit more like, oh, you've arrived. You have a lot longer to go, but you definitely arrived at this place. And so like cool off, we'll give you this
Yeah.
Oscar or whatever.
I feel like Timothée is gonna run into the same thing with Adrian Brody, because
Ah,
Adrian Brody, I think, was the previous youngest Oscar winner for Best Actor for The Pianist, which incredible movie.
absolutely incredible.
And that was during his Saturn return, and then
Yes, it
he did
was.
not
Yeah.
win until basically like The Brutalist, which was a long time after that. And so I kind of see that being the thing with Timothée, right? Like he's going, 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 but then after that, it's going to be a drought again until close to the second Saturn return, which is like
Yeah.
will probably be very annoying for him, I think, as someone that has all that fifth house. But then that's why I think, it makes sense, like these engagement rumors. Like that he's going to be busy doing other stuff once he's accomplished this one thing. And,
Mhm.
admittedly, right? Like you can kind of even see his relationship with Kylie as well, he's summiting Mount Hollywood, Mount whatever, right? Because you cannot think about someone with a fifth house Capricorn stellium like that and assume that they're not strategic in
Yeah.
whoever they choose to date also. And he has had a history of dating the most powerful woman in the room, i.e., like Madonna's daughter in high school. Like, what? And then Lily Rose Depp, Johnny Depp's daughter.
Mhm.
And then now, obviously, like Kylie, and I'm sure he's like dated other people in the process. But I just think that's really fascinating in the context of his chart because, again, he is so determined to get to where he's at. All the pieces have to align, the role, the marketing, the partner, like,
Yeah. Yeah, not only is Mercury in Capricorn going to be pretty strategic, it also sees the midheaven. So it sees where it wants
mm-hmm,
to go. And we were talking about also how he has Venus and Aquarius in the sixth house, which can be this mentality of how do I make this relationship work for me? How do I make it, it's relationship is part of the work. It's part of the job,
mm-hmm,
even though I'm sure it's like a separate, intimate, like beautiful part. Fundamentally, it's all part of that greater career vision when Venus is in the sixth and
mm.
ruling the midheaven. So
And
positioning
ruling the
oneself,
midheaven.
yeah, positioning
Damn.
oneself around influential, powerful people, but also specifically women.
Very interesting. You know, this is really the last thing I'll say between the both of them, but I did think it's interesting that they both do have the Lilith in Cancer in the
Interesting.
11th. So to me, either way, if one person wins, like it incites like a race war, basically.
Race
You know what
war.
I
Yeah.
mean? Because like Cancer again, like the tribalism, and they both are the natural representation. That's why that's why you it's no coincidence you're having this conversation with the both of them at this time as well, because I do think that Lilith in Cancer is quite fascinating. And
Mm.
the fact that again, Michael B. Jordan's moon opposing like Timothee's Cancer, I mean Capricorn stuff, like there's just inherently contradiction in their chart around emphasis and also like what it triggers out of people. How are
Okay.
you
Yeah,
feeling now
yeah.
post this conversation?
Well, I feel two ways. Hi, I'm
Hmm.
Gemini Mars too.
Yes.
So there's the one way I feel, which is helpful, kind of looking at the astrology, looking at the Neptune and Aries of it all, knowing what I know about Neptune and Black culture, and knowing about like what Neptune in this new territory means for Blackness. I am hopeful that white sinners will win and Michael B. Jordan, Ryan Coogler will get their flowers, but even beyond that, right, that Black
Hmm.
culture has a moment. So I'm hopeful that they're going to win. Now, the other side of me is also just having lived through 2025 is incredibly cynical. And with Saturn conjunct Neptune, I do not care or look up to these systems or structures or, award shows as
Hmm.
being a saving grace at all.
Hmm.
So one part of me is, yeah, I'm hopeful the astrology seems on point. Yeah. And then the other side of me in this kind of Neptune, Saturn haze of like disillusionment is like, and also I don't care. Like
Hmm.
I don't care that the Oscars or the BAFTAs, these systems that whatever. You know,
Yeah.
do or don't recognize Black excellence. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. I'm at two minds about it.
It's interesting because you had sent me a video recently about, subverting the concept of Black excellence, right? Because that is in of itself a term eh, that speaks to a certain class experience. It does not actually speak to the whole experience. And,
Yeah.
I would argue the same thing about like Black girl magic. Things like that. Like they can't possibly justify it, so we're gonna just attribute this to like this je ne sais quoi magic, right?
Right.
Which it's like, no, people work really hard for this. Like it's not just
Yeah.
there, okay? Like magic works, but you got to put the effort in. Neptune
Yeah.
and Saturn at the end of the day. So it is interesting to think about the role of these systems in upholding, and yet here's the thing, it still does incite ire, right? Because the systems are in place and they've been there for so long. So it's almost like, well, you can't really necessarily, these are not going to go away,
Mm.
but it therefore is more frustrating when they haven't caught up with
Yeah.
everything. Right. And I think that's where the anger is. It's like, well, it's like we want these things. We do want these recognition. We do want, because systems and history show you the value of something. So that means if you've done something really well and you know that is to your value, you're going to get that. And unfortunately, that's not how this world works. And so what we are hoping for is a correction more meaningfully with Saturn and Neptune and Aries, that it's not just status quo, it actually is going to create more space for other voices. And then awards becomes fun again. And then it becomes a conversation about who's the most deserving rather than who's
Mm.
bought it or who's done the award press circuit well enough, which shouldn't really be a thing, really. If you're thinking
Yeah.
about pure art,
Yeah.
we
You
shall
said
see.
something that helped me to see the Saturn Neptune moment differently too, as like Neptune as the new vision as of what is possible, and Saturn kind of being the anchor. It's just
Mm-hmm.
so slow to keep up. Just
Mm-hmm.
like kind of trying to make sense of what Neptune is trying to imagine. Yeah, so I think as they get farther apart, as
Mm-hmm.
Saturn moves past Neptune and Neptune is kind of untampered with in that way,
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
might see some of this alleviate, right? I feel like we're in a pressure moment of like, we're moving toward tomorrow, but we're still celebrating yesterday. I think that will become more clear in a
Mm-hmm.
good or a bad way, but we'll get more
Mm-hmm.
clarity there because the anchor of Saturn won't be holding back what Neptune is trying to birth.
Beautiful. And what I will end on, I should say, is because 2016 is alive and well in 2026 with, nostalgia or whether it's literally events happening. Last time the Oscars in 2016, we
Yeah.
had we had different winners. It wasn't consistent. So if you won Best Director, it did not mean you won Best Movie. Pluto and Aquarius, Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, more mouths at the table, more different voices at the table. I mean, I personally would really love if Chloe Zhao won Best Adapted Screenplay. Her adopting Hamnet into this fucking amazing portrayal of grief is profound. I know it's disappointing, but in these times, I'm just really thankful to have the astrology to kind of keep time in a way that maybe other people can't visibly see
Yeah,
because the material plane is the densest plane. Saturn is the heaviest in this capacity. And so things do take time to toil and change. But
absolutely.
Saturn's moving to Aries, baby.
Yeah,
Change
fast
now!
moving.
Changes
Time for
now!
something new. Yeah, we're entering a whole new era, you guys. Like the Saturn Neptune conjunction at zero Aries is not to be fucked with. That's the old cannot stay.
No, it really can't. But speaking of the old cannot stay, Camille and I well, we're trying to do a Jan recap, maybe TBD. If you want us to do the Jan recap, let us know. This is
Yeah.
potentially our plan, but if not, we should be coming back soon-ish, weekly-ish.
Heavy on the ish, you guys. You guys get it.
Yeah, there's too much going on anyway, but thank you for tuning in to the first episode of Signs and Headlines in 2026. We're back, baby.
Yes, we're back. Yeah, see you
Bye.
guys.